Hey guys, it's Tim, aka Wombat, and today we're going to talk about something that a lot of you guys have been messaging and asking me about, and that is the new barrel spring range. So the barrel spring range has been around for a couple of months now, and if you're lucky enough to get one of the new XQ11R kits, you'll notice that they actually come with some of the new barrel springs. But what most of you have been messaging and asking about is, how do you read the numbers on the springs? How do they compare, or where do they sit within the existing range of springs that Xpress offer? Now, we'll do a little bit of oversimplified science to try and explain it, but hopefully you'll be able to use that same formula or that same understanding so you can compare the rest of the springs that you have and how to use them effectively on tuning your car. So for the purpose of this video, we're going to oversimplify things. Now, these four springs are actually all different, but where they are the same is the key point in understanding these springs. And where they are the same is the unsprung length. Now, that's 19 millimeters long. That's a linear spring. This is the new barrel spring, and it is also 19 millimeters long. They're also the same gauge steel, which is 1.4 millimeters spring steel. Let's go with the barrel spring here. We'll do the same thing, 1.4. And also we know that they're all designed to fit on the same shock body. So we know that the end diameters are all the same. So we can cancel those ones out. But the two numbers that you must look at to understand these, one of them is the actual coil diameter. Now, in these linear springs here, they're only 17 millimeter diameter. We're just taking the outer diameter for comparison right now. Now, when you go to the barrel springs, the first number that you're looking at is actually the diameter. So this says 19. And we can confirm that by placing the caliper over the top, and there you go, it says 19. And this barrel spring says 20. And same thing, so if we just measure the outer diameter, it says 20 millimeters. So those two dimensions, i.e. unsprung length and actual gauge, they're fixed. We no longer need to compare those. What we will be comparing is the actual outer diameter, and then the most important thing, and that's the amount of coils. And that is, when you look at the starting point of this particular spring, for reference, this is the Xpress Silver, so that's the medium. So that coil starts there. It goes once, twice, 3, 4, 5 and a half. So this is essentially, if we were to use the same numeric value of the barrels, this is a 17 by 5.5 mil coil spring. So the pink spring, we know that the unsprung length is the same, we know that the outer diameter is the same, and we know that the gauge is the same as that spring here. But what makes these two different is the amount of coils. Starting from the end coil there, 1 full coil, 2, 3, 4, 5 and a quarter only. So 5 1/4 coils versus 5 1/2 coils. So simply, if you were to unravel these into a straight line, the silver spring would be a little bit longer than the pink spring. And there is the black linear spring, for your curiosity purposes, is the same, but it's 5 3/4 coils. Now, let's look at the barrel springs. As we said before, we measured the outer diameter. It says 19. This one here says 20. Let's use this one for example. 19 by 6.5 coils. Simple. This one here, 20 by 6.5 coils. So 20, 19, 17 and 17 on the linear ones. The math is pretty straightforward. If you were to unravel all of these springs into a straight line, you will have a set length. Now, understanding how springs work, it's pretty straightforward. It's how much force is required to bend or to deviate the spring a certain amount. So the longer the spring with the same amount of force, it's going to deviate more. It's going to bend more. It's going to be easier. Or on the other end of the formula, If you wanted, I guess, the same amount of deviation, the longer spring requires less force. Pretty straightforward. Now, as far as progressive versus linear goes, this range actually sits below, and that's pretty straightforward with that formula that you use, but it sits below the softest offering that the linear range gives you. So if the softest linear spring was the black, which is essentially 17 by 5 3/4, the next softest spring is actually the hardest in the barrel spring range. The hardest, I believe, is 19 by 5 full coils. And then it goes to 19 by 5.5. And then it goes to 19 by 6, and then 19 by 6.5. And then we start again, and we go to the 20s. So that's pretty straightforward in how you can compare those springs. You can actually use that same formula and apply it to other springs, X-ray springs, axons, Mugen springs and whatnot. So, but what you want to do is obviously start to cancel out the variables. So look at the unsprung length and then look at the actual gauge. So if you have a thicker gauge but the same amount of coils, we know that the thicker gauge is a stronger steel. So it's going to be a stiffer spring. But like I said, to simplify the purposes here, this is more just looking at the Xpress springs and how they compare to each other within the range. So larger diameter, more coils, softer. Smaller diameter, less coils, stiffer. Pretty straightforward. All right, go grab your springs, grab some calipers, have a measure up, and start understanding your springs a little bit better. But what about progressive versus linear? Now that's pretty straightforward because we know that this is fixed at 17 millimeter diameter, and these are between 19 and 20, but their ends are also going to be 17 millimeter. So it averages out a little bit. How does that work and what does it feel like on the car? Well, let's talk about linear at first. This is the same rate throughout its full range of compression in the linear springs, hence the name linear. Progressive is going to be a little bit softer because it's going to allow the larger coils to compress first, and then as the load increases, it becomes a little bit stiffer. You can almost see it as we compress the springs here. What that means as far as handling goes is that the progressive springs do a better job at actually absorbing the bumps through the small rate of travel. And as it gets deeper into it, it stiffens up and behaves a little bit like these guys. When would you use these springs, the progressive or softer rate springs? Well, lower traction tracks or something that's a little bit bumpier. So if you want to utilize a little bit more of your mechanical grip, then the progressive springs have been a really great addition or tuning aid. And then if you've got a high grip track and you want to, I guess, if you want to deal with traction rolling, then the linear rate springs are a little bit better in dealing with that. I've actually been using a combination of all of them. But on the smaller, tighter and low traction tracks, these barrel springs have been an amazing addition to my tuning kit. So that's it, a pretty simple formula. Hopefully you now can go and apply that formula to the springs that you've already got. The barrel springs already noted those important numbers on there. But yeah, look, even if you've got other brands, you can start using that same formula or apply that on there, and you can either figure out if you've got a lot of duplicate springs, or you can start to fine tune the entire range that you've got. So if you've got any more questions regarding springs or anything else, feel free to hit us up, drop it in the comments, or feel free to DM me. So until next time.